Modern Love, the podcast, is supported by...
Produced by the iLab at WBUR, Boston.
From the New York Times and WBUR Boston, this is Modern Love. Stories of love, loss, and redemption. I'm your host, Meghna Chakrabarty. Sometimes we're lucky enough to stumble into fleeting friendships in unexpected places. But those can be the people who pull you through. Sally Hoskins writes about one of those moments in her essay, The Kindness and Xanax of Strangers. It's read by Lesley Manville. Lesley stars in the new movie, Ordinary Love.
There is no more cliched time to get a diagnosis of breast cancer than National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The 31 days of October, when you can't make a move without seeing a pink ribbon, either the genuine article or its likeness in frosting or smoked salmon. My diagnosis was particularly poorly timed, given that I had just written about having put my previous bout with breast cancer 15 years earlier behind me. But at my annual mammogram 2 months before, it was déjà vu all over the X-ray screen. I had a fresh case in my previously unscathed breast. The new occurrence was local, meaning no multiple surgeries, no chemotherapy. This time, I had the very best form of breast cancer. Way to go. Still, the initial shock demanded its due. I spent one night in despair, called a couple of close friends, then realized I didn't need to tell everyone. I was feeling better already. Last time, I joined a breast cancer support group for 2 months of officially sanctioned meetings. We discussed everything from death to sex, to whether hydration during chemo could include Johnny Walker Black Label. Rather than disband after 8 weeks, my gang of 6 continued getting together to cheer one another's progress and compare scars. No one ever had to apologize for making panicky middle-of-the-night phone calls, for seeking the comfort of conversation after a what-if nightmare. I was 40-ish then, relatively early in my career, still thinking I might remarry and have children, clueless that chemo would induce early menopause. But now, a decade and a half later, roads had been taken, choices had been made. This time, the idea of a support group didn't even occur to me. Breast cancer? I knew the drill. Nevertheless, a few weeks after receiving my diagnosis, I found myself jammed into an 8-by-8-foot waiting room at the hospital with a cluster of similarly blindsided women, though they were all first-timers. Because of a scheduling error, we had overlapping appointments and were in this holding cell together outside the surgical zone. It was an instant support group, if you wanted one. I didn't. Like contestants in The Amazing Race, we had each jumped multiple hurdles to get this far. Step 1. Don the hospital costume of 2 pale green plaid gowns, one open in front, one in back, and grey socks with plastic treads. Ignore that it makes you look like a hazing victim from some sorority of the perimenopausal. Underneath, put on disposable underwear. It's extremely flat and appears to have been stamped out of a roll of plastic mesh. When you first pick it up, it's not clear that it can adapt to a 3-dimensional body. Finally, return to the family waiting area and try to blend in among the healthy, fully clothed humans. Amazing Cancer Race Step 2. When your name is called, find your nurse, who will review the upcoming procedure and start an IV. My nurse began by asking if I had a healthcare proxy. "You mean the pull the plug form?" She bristled. "Everyone calls it that, but that's not what it is." I asked her to look it up from 15 years ago. She scanned the computer screen. "Someone called Charlie. My extremely ex-boyfriend. Can I update that?" I listed a neurologist friend, someone I would trust to read the brainwaves, or lack thereof. My chatty nurse wanted to know more about Charlie. I told her it was an amicable breakup once I got over being left for another woman. That took a mere 3 years. Now he's with a babe in her 30s, young enough to be his daughter. Not that there is anything wrong with that. I'm happily solo. I skipped the part about my then diagnosis postponing our split. We had been on the verge of parting for months, but I suddenly needed someone to lean on, and only a rat dumps a cancer patient. This time I would go it alone. No reluctant boyfriend to drag along. No support group. I asked the nurse whether the upcoming procedure, inserting a thin wire to mark where the surgeon should cut, would hurt. Last time we skipped this step, and my new doctors had been cagey about pain. She met my gaze and asked, "Do you have any Xanax?" In the pocket of my disposable underwear? Stuck behind my ear in a wad of gum? I'd been told to bring virtually nothing, no purse, money, jewellery or credit cards. Clearly, while I was under the knife, someone would be rifling through my locker, maybe stealing my 3-dimensional underwear. I shook my head. She went on, "Lots of women use something to take the edge off." "Great, now you tell me." In my post-diagnosis visits to 3 different doctors, none had suggested pharmacological support or whipped out a prescription pad. After starting my IV, the nurse ushered me back to the public waiting room, where I grabbed a copy of Elle magazine with the cover line, "I left my wife for a younger woman," and ruined my life. I wanted details. I needed to hear how this man learned his lesson. But I was still searching for the article when, step 3, they called me to the inner sanctum waiting area where I joined the aforementioned cluster of women, 3 patients and 1 supportive daughter. After the nurse apologised that we would be there for a while, we looked at one another, half smiled, and started trading war stories about our needle biopsies performed all over the eastern seaboard. Delaware, New Jersey, Manhattan, Westchester County, New York. I started feeling a familiar camaraderie, but resisted saying, if I'd known we'd be here for so long, I'd have brought Elle. Did you see the article about the guy who? Delaware's daughter jumped up, ran out, and took it for me from the outer waiting room. I was touched. While the 4 of them talked about basic breast cancer stuff like the rookies they were, I refrained from revealing my second-time status. Instead, I read about the writer who married too young, left his wife and children for a research assistant, was dumped, and realised it was his time to grow up. Ah, men. I tuned back into the conversation when Westchester mentioned Xanax. It seemed they'd all taken one. Apparently, some things never change. As a teenager, I was the only girl who didn't know key details about first-time sex. Now, I was the only patient who had not taken my tranquilizers. When I admitted this, Delaware and her daughter exchanged a look. Then Delaware said, "I might have another one." She rummaged through her daughter's purse, pulling out a crumpled Ziploc bag containing a mix of pink, blue and white pills. New Jersey said, "Yeah, take one." Delaware dumped a pale blue tablet into my palm. I briefly considered declining. After all, This pill didn't come from a prescription bottle, and I had known this woman for only 12 minutes. But in that little room with my unexpected club of fellow travellers, downing the pill was practically a reflex. We had been instructed not to take anything by mouth after midnight, but Delaware's daughter handed me a cup of water, announcing authoritatively that I could have one sip. I was already accepting drugs from her mother, so what the heck? I swallowed, and my peers smiled approvingly, basking in their chemically enhanced glow. Every 10 minutes or so, one of them checked to see whether I was feeling it yet. A sixth woman then crowded in and announced that she had just had the wire insertion. No big deal. We eyed her with suspicion. Westchester asked, "Did you have a needle biopsy last week?" Translation, "Do you know what pain is?" Answer, "Yeah, this was nothing like that. Piece of cake." We exchanged relieved grins. The new woman was apparently hanging with us until she got the all clear for step 4, the surgery waiting room. I felt lightness in the crown of my head, no doubt the Xanax kicking in. I said, "Hey, she didn't really have the wire thing. Her job is to put on a gown and pop into waiting rooms pretending she went through the procedures just to reassure the real patients." Everyone laughed. When I saw my nurse again, I had a definite buzz. But suddenly couldn't recall if the drug she had suggested was Xanax or Valium. Could be trouble. What if Xanax was not allowed and I would have to come back for the procedure another day? I dummied up. 2 minutes later, it occurred to me that I didn't want to find out too late that the pill I had swallowed would interact with the anaesthesia, even if I had updated my pull-the-plug document. I caught the nurse's eye. Remember you told me about taking something for relaxation?" She nodded. "I just took a Xanax." She thought I was joking. By all appearances, I was a responsible adult, a neurobiologist, as she knew, and so not exactly a prime candidate for scoring controlled substances in the waiting room. But there it was. I had depended on the kindness and drug stashes of strangers. My nurse said it was okay and squeezed my shoulder, and I went confidently to step 5. The wire insertion, knowing I would bob along the surface of my fear for the rest of the day. Yes, I was buoyed in part by my Xanax-filled water wings, but what really kept me afloat was the one thing I had mistakenly believed I could do without. The loving care that flows freely among female strangers, even in short-term groups like this one. Established within minutes and disbanded just as quickly, only to reform with a whole new cast in the next waiting room and the next. 15 years ago, I needed a soon-to-be ex-boyfriend to maintain the trappings of a doomed relationship. I needed support group meetings even when I no longer needed support. This time I had tapped into something simpler and deeper. There would be plenty of pain and anxiety to come, surgery, follow-up treatments. Yet each appointment promised more waiting rooms full of women who would pull me through.
That's Lesley Manville reading Sally Hoskins' essay, The Kindness and Xanax of Strangers. We'll catch up with Sally after the break. Sally Hoskins says that she's been in and out of a lot of hospital waiting rooms in her life, but this experience stood out to her.
This was the first time that once you put on the gown, you were not sequestered in a little closet somewhere. You were sent back out with the families and the normal people who were wearing street clothing. And it just feels you feel almost naked being out there in this hideous plaid gown, sitting among the regular people. And you even have an IV in your arm. So it's like, hello, I'm ill. I'm just going to sit here next to you and read a magazine. It was a very strange feeling. You feel very exposed. And I think that was part of what set me off that day. Yeah, I was really trying to not admit that I was in the same boat as everybody else and trying to not join in and talk about what it was like to get diagnosed. I was trying to kind of keep my little separateness. But as it turned out, it's really smarter to take your fellowship where you can get it, and in this case, your Xanax as well.
Sally says that she thinks people take two different approaches to sharing their experience with cancer.
I think there's some people who really like telling everyone, blogging about it, making it a sort of a daily thing. And then there's others of us who sort of want to get the treatment over with and move on and kind of not have it be something we address every single day. And I think people need to do what works for them. But for me, especially the second time around, I just thought, wait, I don't have to tell as many people as I told the first time. Like, why don't I just, keep this to myself more? And that worked much better for me. Because, if you tell people, very well-meaning people will come up and go, how are you? That kind of thing. And it's very sweet and kind, but it also is recasting you as a cancer patient. And, we're very many things besides that.
Sally is 66 now and has recently retired. She says she's working at being as healthy as she can right now, and she's happily single.
I'm really enjoying retirement and my own personal projects, and I don't feel that romantic tug that I felt very heavily in my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's just a freedom thing, but there's something very nice about being a woman on her own in New York City without the need to work, who can just do things when you want, do what you want, with whom you want. It's pretty great. So not to knock modern love, but I think there's a lot of freedom for women, especially if they stay unpaired. So that's working for me right now.
That's Sally Hoskins. She was a biology professor at the City College of New York for 31 years. She lives in New York City. More from Modern Love editor Daniel Jones and actress Lesley Manville after the break. Here's Daniel Jones, editor of the Modern Love column for the New York Times.
Well, Sally's essay is really just the sort of barest thread of a story. We have her earlier cancer diagnosis, the man she was with then and how short-lived that was. But really it's just almost a study of how we can sort of get our own little support group, how so many sort of medical issues or any kind of loss or any kind of difficulty at all, other people are going through it, and how you form bonds with them and how important they become, and how having a sense of humor about it all and a sense of camaraderie about this shared anxiety, and just how incredibly important that is. And I like the idea of the sort of handoff from the person she needed last time, and how this is just this sort of friendship group and support group that springs from people just finding themselves in the same situation and needing to find their way through it. It's the kind of just sort of naturally forming attachments that may surprise us, but really we can't live without.
And here's Lesley Manville on why she wanted to read this piece.
I chose this story because it seems appropriate to the film that I have opening at the moment here, called Ordinary Love, in which Liam Neeson and I play a couple who have been married for a very long time, decades, and the wife, Joan, who I play, is going through breast cancer.
Thank you to Lesley for reading this week's essay. Ordinary Love is in theaters now. Modern Love is a production of the New York Times and WBUR, Boston's NPR station. It's produced, directed, and edited by Caitlin O'Keefe. Original scoring and sound design by Matt Reed. Iris Adler is our executive producer. We're edited by Catherine Brewer. Daniel Jones is the editor of Modern Love for the New York Times and advisor to the show. The idea for the Modern Love podcast was conceived by Lisa Tobin. Special thanks to Julia Simon, Anya Stremian, and Mia Lee at the New York Times. Additional music courtesy of APM. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps new listeners find us. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. We'll see you next week.